Justin Gaethje is feeling confident about a potential fight against Islam Makhachev, and he believes it's a much better matchup for him compared to his bout against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Back in 2020, Gaethje faced Khabib for the lightweight title in what turned out to be Khabib's final fight in MMA. Unfortunately for Gaethje, he was unable to get the win that night, and in a recent Q&A on his YouTube channel, he reflected on that fight, admitting he's unsure if anything he could have done would have changed the outcome. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Justin Gaethje said, "I think Khabib was probably the one who I felt. Even if I performed better, I'm not sure that I could have beat him on that night specifically. So that night that I fought Khabib, I would say that he was my toughest opponent to date." Despite that loss, Gaethje remains determined to chase lightweight gold and sees a fight with the current champion Islam Makhachev as his dream fight. He believes Makhachev presents a different challenge than Khabib and one that he matches up better against. "I want to fight Makhachev, he's the champ, and I do believe that is a better matchup for me than Khabib." While discussing his dream opponent, Gaethje was also asked about the toughest fight he's had mentally. Surprisingly, he pointed to his recent fight against Max Holloway at UFC 300, explaining that it was difficult to prepare himself mentally for a fight he never imagined happening. "I think the Max fight was a very difficult fight mentally for me because he's a 145-pounder. I've never ever pictured or dreamt or thought that I would ever fight him. And then when it came along, it was really a mental challenge to get myself there, and yeah, that was a tough one." Gaethje also mentioned that his fight against Charles Oliveira was another tough one, as he had been dealing with an unfortunate accident leading up to the fight. He also said, "Also, the Oliveira fight was a tough one. Wrecked my bike 8 days before." With Holloway now permanently moving up to 155 after his loss to Ilia Topuria, there's a possibility that Gaethje and Holloway could cross paths again. Depending on how things play out between Gaethje and Dan Hooker, a rematch with Holloway could be on the table in the future. If Gaethje is looking for redemption, that might be a fight to watch. Belal Muhammad has made it crystal clear he would rather vacate the welterweight title than fight his close friend and training partner Islam Makhachev. Islam has been vocal about his ambitions, stating that before he retires, he wants to claim a second championship, maybe even a third. However, there's a major obstacle standing in the way of that goal. Belal Muhammad currently sits atop the welterweight division. Since the two have no desire to fight each other, the only logical move for Islam would be to go up to middleweight, but Dana White doesn't seem too keen on that idea. Belal himself has put any doubts to rest, saying that Islam wouldn't even need to move up because he would simply vacate the belt for him. "I would never fight Islam because that's different for me and him. I know it is, right? We've trained together, and you know when you're sweating with somebody, it's just a different relationship. It wouldn't be about money for me or for him. I don't assume so. I would never want to do that. They've helped me so much. So for me, I would rather go up to 185 and let him just take 170 if that's the case." Belal Muhammad said in an interview with Barstool Chicago. Belal's logic makes sense. He's already fought his way to the top of the 170-pound division, taking on and defeating 5 top 10 opponents. And now he believes he's close to a shot at 185. "Since I've already had to fight my way up to 170 and beaten 5 top 10 guys, I'm 2 fights away from being able to challenge at 185. And saying I want to be double champ, I think 185 is probably the easiest weight class besides heavyweight," he said. That's a bold claim, especially when you consider that he also took a dig at the division's top contenders. "When you look at that main event this weekend, you're like, bro, Strickland and Duplessis suck," Belal Muhammad said. If Belal does follow through with his plan to move up after another 2 fights, the big question is, who does he face at 170 before vacating? The most obvious answer is Shavkat Rakhmonov. If Belal wins that fight, his next challenge could be the winner of Leon Edwards versus Jack Della Maddalena. But there's another name that keeps getting thrown around, Kamaru Usman. The tension between Belal and Usman has been building for a while now, especially after their back and forth exchanges on social media. The infamous Pound for Pound podcast, where Belal reportedly made Usman emotional, has yet to be released, but their feud continues to heat up. However, it's important to acknowledge that Usman is currently on a 3-fight losing streak, with 2 of those being for the title. His most recent defeat came against Khamzat Chimaev on short notice. So would a fight between Belal and Usman even make sense at this stage? Or would it be a step back for Muhammad? If Belal wins his next fight, it might be time to officially move up and let Islam take over at 170. But whether Dana White and the UFC will go along with that plan remains to be seen. Conor McGregor is appealing his civil case after being found liable by a jury back in November. McGregor is following through on his promise to appeal the ruling. While he wasn't found guilty, the ruling was enough that he was dropped by Proper 12 as the public figure and even the Hitman game, said reports. Additionally, amid protests against him in Ireland, McGregor had beverages such as his forged Irish stout removed from shelves. According to the BBC, last Friday McGregor, who has continued to maintain his innocence despite the ruling, filed an appeal, said BBC. If McGregor wins the appeal, he would no longer owe Nikita Hand the 248,000 euros or $259,000 that he was ordered to pay for damages, nor the money he was ordered to pay toward Hand's legal fees. Could this possibly restore Conor McGregor's image in the public eye? Or has the damage been done to his reputation for good? Said analysts. Nikita Hand did stop the CCTV footage of that night from coming out to the public, and the court forced Conor McGregor to hand over all copies of the tapes. So we'll see where things go from here, said legal experts. In the meantime, McGregor has continued to promote BKFC while teasing an eventual move to bare-knuckle boxing before his fighting career is over. Concerns are starting to rise for Alex Pereira as we get closer to UFC 313, and it's not just fans who are worried. Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen are sounding the alarm. They believe Pereira might not be taking his upcoming fight against Magomed Ankalaev seriously enough. Cormier recently ran into Ankalaev at the UFC Performance Institute, and he was struck by how locked in the Russian contender looked. Meanwhile, Pereira has been spotted in Australia, attending concerts, doing public interviews, and engaging in activities that don't exactly scream fight camp. This has led to some serious doubts about whether the reigning champ is preparing the way he should be. Cormier didn't hold back when discussing his concerns. He pointed out that while it's possible to get training in while traveling, it's never the same as being fully locked into camp with your team. When you're on the road, sure, you can hit the treadmill in a hotel lobby or clear some space in your room for a mitt workout, but it's not the same, DC explained. Pereira fights in 2 weeks, and he's still in Australia. That's concerning. He's the underdog going into this fight, and Ankalaev is already in Vegas, fully locked in. And it's not just Ankalaev who's deep in preparation. Alexander Volkanovski has reportedly joined Ankalaev's camp to help him sharpen his skills ahead of UFC 313. That only adds to the growing concern that Pereira might be showing up to fight night at a serious disadvantage. The travel alone is something to think about. Flying back from Australia means dealing with time zone adjustments, jet lag, and fatigue, things that could take away valuable time from the final crucial weeks of fight camp. Another major red flag: Glover Teixeira, Pereira's longtime mentor and wrestling coach, doesn't seem to be as involved in his preparation as many expected. That's a problem because if there's one thing we know about Ankalaev, it's that he's a dangerous, well-rounded fighter with a strong wrestling base. If Pereira isn't getting the right looks in training, this fight could turn into a nightmare for him. Chael Sonnen echoed these concerns, emphasizing that Ankalaev has been locked in for months, while Pereira appears to be spreading himself thin with outside commitments. Pereira better get home right now, Sonnen said. He's going to have to deal with all that travel, all that time difference, and he's facing a guy who's been fully focused on this fight the entire time. That's a dangerous situation to be in. The odds makers already have Pereira listed as a plus 200 underdog, meaning many believe Ankalaev has the upper hand. If Pereira isn't dialed in, things could go south quickly. It's one thing to have the striking advantage, but if he isn't sharp and ready for a grueling battle, Ankalaev will take full advantage of it. So now the big question is, will Pereira turn things around in time, or is this a disaster waiting to happen? UFC 313 is just around the corner, and it's shaping up to be a high-stakes fight that could define Pereira's legacy as champion. What do you think? Is DC overreacting, or is there real cause for concern? Drop your thoughts in the comments.